My name is Megan Reynolds, and 3 weeks ago, my entire life changed when I discovered I had won $34 million in the lottery. As I stared at those 6 matching numbers on my screen, my hands trembled so violently I nearly dropped my phone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. I was suddenly wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. After taxes, it would amount to around $19 million, an unfathomable sum for someone who had been clipping coupons and budgeting every penny just days before. But instead of rushing to tell everyone, a strange thought crossed my mind. What if I told absolutely no one about this money? You see, I've always been the responsible one in my family, the one everyone calls when they need a loan, a place to stay, or someone to bail them out of trouble. At 32, I had built a modest life as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm in Denver. My one-bedroom apartment wasn't fancy, but it was mine, paid for with my own hard-earned money. I drove a 2012 Hyundai that made concerning noises whenever it rained, but it got me where I needed to go. Every morning began the same way: alarm at 5:45 a.m., cheap coffee from my dented French press, and the nagging worry about whether I was putting enough into my retirement account. My job demanded long hours and offered little recognition, but it paid the bills, mostly. I had about $14,000 in student loan debt still looming over me, a constant reminder of the financial tightrope I walked. My family situation was complicated. My parents, Thomas and Ellen Reynolds, divorced when I was 12, and both quickly remarried within a year. My father found Linda, a former yoga instructor, with expensive taste and little patience for his previous life, which included me. My mother married Richard, a successful real estate developer who treated money like a weapon, something to be wielded, not shared. I have an older brother, David, who at 35 still hasn't found his calling. He's brilliant, charming, and hasn't held a job for more than 8 months in his entire adult life. He's perfected the art of the desperate phone call, always with a new business idea that needs just a little startup capital, or an emergency that requires immediate financial assistance. I've lost count of how many times I've emptied my meager savings to help him, only to see no return and no lasting change in his situation. Then there's my younger sister, Rachel. At 28, she appears to have it all: a surgeon husband named Eric, 2 photogenic children, and a sprawling home in an exclusive neighborhood. Her Instagram feed looks like a lifestyle magazine, carefully curated to project perfection. What few people know is how often she calls me to complain about their mounting debt, or to ask for loans that we both know will never be repaid. Beyond my immediate family, there's my father's sister, Aunt Patricia. Despite living in a multi-million-dollar home and taking luxury vacations 3 times a year, she has always been the first to comment on my modest lifestyle choices. Still in that tiny apartment, Megan? Still driving that old car? You know, at your age, I already had a house and a Mercedes. Her son, my cousin Tyler, inherited her judgmental nature but none of her financial success. He's asked me for money 5 times in the past year alone. The only genuine relationship I have is with my mother's sister, Aunt Carol. Unlike the rest of my family, Carol has never had much money. She works as a school librarian in a small town about an hour outside Denver, lives in a cramped apartment filled with books and plants, and drives a 20-year-old Toyota that has more rust than paint. Yet she's the only one who calls me regularly without wanting something, who remembers my birthday without Facebook reminders, who sends me care packages when I'm sick. My best friend Emma is the only other person in my life who truly understands my family dynamic. We met in college, and she's witnessed firsthand the emotional and financial toll my family has taken on me over the years. They treat you like an ATM, not a daughter or sister. She's told me more times than I can count. I always defended them, making excuses for their behavior, convincing myself that family helps family no matter what. The pattern was always the same. They'd call with a crisis, I'd empty my account to help, they'd promise to pay me back, and then I'd never hear about it again until the next emergency. When David needed $4,000 for rent, after losing yet another job, I gave him my entire tax return. When Rachel needed $3,500 for her daughter's private preschool tuition, I put it on my credit card. When my father needed $2,000 to fix the roof on his vacation cabin, a cabin I've been invited to exactly once, I sent a check, only to see Facebook photos of him and Linda in Cancun the following month. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My workplace wasn't much better. My boss, Vanessa, had a habit of taking credit for my ideas during client presentations. My coworker, Jeff, consistently left work for me to finish, while somehow receiving recognition for team efforts. Despite being undervalued, I continued showing up early and leaving late, hoping someday my dedication would be noticed. Playing the lottery was my one small indulgence, a $10 weekly ritual that my family ridiculed mercilessly. "It's a tax on people who can't do math," my mother would say with a dismissive wave of her hand. My father would launch into lengthy explanations about probability and statistics. David would joke that I should just give him the money directly instead of throwing it away. But there was something about those tickets that gave me hope, a tiny chance at freedom that I couldn't bring myself to abandon. I had dreams, modest ones by most standards. I wanted to travel beyond weekend road trips to nearby states. I wanted to go back to school for a master's degree in something I was actually passionate about. I wanted to have enough savings that an unexpected car repair wouldn't throw my budget into chaos for months. But these dreams seemed increasingly distant as I approached my mid-30s, still paying off student loans and carrying a small but persistent credit card debt that never seemed to diminish despite my careful budgeting. Each month was a delicate balancing act: mortgage, utilities, groceries, student loans, car insurance, and if I was very careful, maybe one dinner out with Emma. I knew exactly which store had the best price on every item on my shopping list. I could tell you the cost per ounce of every brand of coffee at 3 different supermarkets. I had mastered the art of appearing perfectly fine while mentally calculating if I could afford to say yes to an invitation or if I needed to invent an excuse to stay home. This was my life before everything changed. Ordinary, sometimes difficult, occasionally lonely, but stable in its own way. I had no idea how 6 random numbers were about to completely upend everything I thought I knew about myself and the people I called family. The day I bought the winning ticket was nothing special. It was a Friday like any other, except it happened to be my 32nd birthday. I had just finished a particularly exhausting week at work, where Vanessa had taken credit for my marketing strategy that had secured a major client. As usual, I stopped at Joe's convenience store on my way home. "Happy birthday, Megan," Joe called as I entered. Joe was a kind older man who had owned the store for decades and knew all his regular customers by name. He always had a friendly word and often set aside the last copy of my favorite magazine when new issues arrived. "Thanks, Joe." "The usual, please, but maybe an extra ticket for birthday luck," I replied, handing him $20 instead of my typical $10. "Birthday splurge, huh? Maybe today's your lucky day," he said with a wink as he handed me my tickets. Instead of my usual quick pick, I decided on a whim to choose my own numbers. I selected my birth date, 7/19, my parents' anniversary, 5/22, and Emma's birthday, 8/30. 6 numbers that represented significant dates in my life, even the painful ones. That evening, I treated myself to takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, opened a bottle of wine Emma had given me as a birthday gift, and settled in for a quiet night alone. The lottery drawing was at 8 p.m., but I barely paid attention as I scrolled through social media, seeing posts from acquaintances enjoying far more exciting birthday celebrations than mine. At 8:30, I remembered the tickets and lazily picked up my phone to check the numbers, expecting nothing as usual. The first number matched, 7. I smiled slightly. The second matched, 19. My heart rate picked up just a bit. Third number, 5. I sat up straighter. Fourth, 22. My palms were sweating now. Fifth, 8. I was holding my breath. Sixth and final, 30. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I checked again and again, convinced I must have misread something. I turned on the television and rewound to the live drawing. I watched as each of my numbers appeared on the screen, one after another. My hands shook so badly I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered to the empty apartment. "No way." According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner of $34 million. After taxes, it would be around $19 million. An unfathomable sum for someone who had been excited earlier that day about a 20% off coupon for laundry detergent. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I spent hours researching lottery winners online. What I found was disturbing. Stories of winners whose lives fell apart after their windfall. Families torn apart by greed. Friends and distant relatives appearing out of nowhere with sob stories and outstretched hands. Winners who were bankrupt within 5 years. More miserable than before they'd won. One article called the lottery the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun rose, I made my decision. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Emma. At least not right away. I needed time to process this, to make a plan, to understand what this money would mean for my life before everyone else tried to tell me what to do with it. That morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and made an appointment with Andrew Barnes, an attorney specializing in financial planning and estate law. His office was in a downtown high-rise, and as I sat in the waiting room in my ordinary clothes, clutching my purse with the winning ticket inside, I felt like an imposter. "Ms. Reynolds." Andrew greeted me, extending his hand. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and placed the ticket on his desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone finding out it was me." His eyes widened briefly as he examined the ticket. Then he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place." Over the next 2 hours, Andrew explained my options. In our state, lottery winners could claim prizes through trusts or legal entities that would keep their identities private. He outlined the process of setting up a blind trust, how taxes would work, and the importance of assembling a team of financial advisors to help manage such a large sum. "The biggest mistake winners make," he told me, "is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there's no going back." I nodded, relieved that my instinct had been correct. I want to do this right. I don't want this money to ruin my life. As I left Andrew's office with a folder full of documents and a list of next steps, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I had more money than I had ever dreamed of, yet I couldn't share this life-changing news with anyone. I would be living a double life, pretending to be the same struggling marketing coordinator while secretly being a multi-millionaire. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with Andrew to establish the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan that would ensure I would never have to worry about money again, even if I lived to be 100. The money was real now, sitting in accounts under my control. Yet, my day-to-day life remained unchanged. I still went to work, still complained about bills with coworkers, still drove my old Hyundai. The secrecy was starting to weigh on me. I found myself wondering about my family. Would they be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries? Or would they see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions haunted me, and gradually, an idea began to form. What if there was a way to find out how my family would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who to share my secret with? The plan crystallized one night as I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I needed financial help. Not a huge amount, but enough to be significant. I would approach each family member with the same story, the same request, and see who would help me without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I know who deserved to be part of my new life. The next day, I met with Andrew again to ensure my finances were properly secured before proceeding with my plan. We had established a diverse investment portfolio, set up trusts for future charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was safely invested, untouchable by anyone but me. "Everything is in order, Megan," Andrew assured me, sliding a folder across his polished desk. "Your financial future is secure." You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to. The thought was tempting, but I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I think I'll stay at my job for now, I replied. At least until I figure some things out. That evening, I invited Emma over for dinner. As we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I couldn't keep everything bottled up, and I trusted her more than anyone. I'm thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my family. I began carefully. Emma raised an eyebrow. What kind of experiment? I took a deep breath. I'm going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it. Emma's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Megan, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being the only one who helps when others need it, I said, not quite meeting her eyes. I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. But lying to test people doesn't sound like you. Emma set down her wine glass. Why not just ask them how they feel about you? Have an honest conversation? I laughed without humor. Right, because my family is so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Emma. You've seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong. What are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, I insisted, though that wasn't entirely true. I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource. Emma shook her head. I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this, but I know that look in your eye. You've already made up your mind. She was right. I had spent that day crafting my story, making sure it was believable but not so dramatic that it would raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the marketing firm I worked for had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest clients. I would say I needed $4,000 to cover rent and living expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, but not outrageous, and certainly not beyond the means of most of my family members. I made a list of everyone I would approach. My mother Ellen and stepfather Richard, my father Thomas and stepmother Linda, my sister Rachel and her husband Eric, my brother David, my aunt Carol, my aunt Patricia, and my cousin Tyler. 10 people, all of whom had turned to me for help at some point, all of whom I had supported either financially or emotionally when they needed it. The next day, I practiced my story with Emma, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her misgivings. You need to sound genuinely distressed but not desperate, she advised. And have specific details ready about the company closing. They might ask questions. I nodded, taking notes. I'll say the CEO had been embezzling funds, and the company is under investigation. That would explain why it happened so suddenly and why I might not get my final paycheck. And what about your job search? They'll ask about that. I've been applying everywhere, but the market is tight, especially for specialized marketing positions. I have some interviews. Deciding who to share my secret with? The plan crystallized one night as I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I needed financial help. Not a huge amount, but enough to be significant. I would approach each family member with the same story, the same request, and see who would help me without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I know who deserved to be part of my new life. The next day, I met with Andrew again to ensure my finances were properly secured before proceeding with my plan. We had established a diverse investment portfolio, set up trusts for future charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was safely invested, untouchable by anyone but me. Everything is in order, Megan, Andrew assured me, sliding a folder across his polished desk. Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to. The thought was tempting, but I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I think I'll stay at my job for now, I replied, at least until I figure some things out. That evening, I invited Emma over for dinner. As we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I couldn't keep everything bottled up, and I trusted her more than anyone. I'm thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my family. I began carefully. Emma raised an eyebrow. What kind of experiment? I took a deep breath. I'm going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it. Emma's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. Megan, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being the only one who helps when others need it, I said, not quite meeting her eyes. I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. But lying to test people doesn't sound like you. Emma set down her wine glass. Why not just ask them how they feel about you? Have an honest conversation? I laughed without humor. Right, because my family is so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Emma. You've seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong. What are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, I insisted, though that wasn't entirely true. I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource. Emma shook her head. I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this, but I know that look in your eye. You've already made up your mind. She was right. I had spent that day crafting my story, making sure it was believable but not so dramatic that it would raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the marketing firm I worked for had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest clients. I would say I needed $4,000 to cover rent and living expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, but not outrageous, and certainly not beyond the means of most of my family members. I made a list of everyone I would approach. My mother Ellen and stepfather Richard, my father Thomas and stepmother Linda, my sister Rachel and her husband Eric, my brother David, my Aunt Carol, my Aunt Patricia, and my cousin Tyler. 10 people, all of whom had turned to me for help at some point, all of whom I had supported either financially or emotionally when they needed it. The next day, I practiced my story with Emma, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her misgivings. You need to sound genuinely distressed but not desperate, she advised. And have specific details ready about the company closing. They might ask questions. I nodded, taking notes. I'll say the CEO had been embezzling funds, and the company is under investigation. That would explain why it happened so suddenly and why I might not get my final paycheck. And what about your job search? They'll ask about that. I've been applying everywhere, but the market is tight, especially for specialized marketing positions. I have some interviews lined up, but nothing definite yet, and my emergency fund is depleted from some recent car repairs. I had thought through every detail, creating a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising too many questions. As I finalized my plan, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was Emma right? Was this manipulative and wrong? But then I remembered all the times I had emptied my savings to help these same people, often at great personal cost, and my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about testing them. It was about protecting myself and my future. I made a prediction list of how I thought each person would respond. My mother would probably offer some help, but less than I needed. My father would lecture me about financial responsibility but might send a small amount. Rachel would claim she couldn't help due to the kids' expenses. David would definitely say he had no money. Richard and Linda would refuse outright. Aunt Patricia would judge me for my poor life choices. Cousin Tyler would promise help that would never materialize. The only person I had real hope for was Aunt Carol. Despite having the least to give, she had always been the most generous with what she had. But even with her, I tried to keep my expectations low. $4,000 was a lot of money for a school librarian living alone. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each family member individually, tell them the same story, and see who stepped up. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my lottery win. Only then would I know who truly cared about me beyond what I could do for them. With a mix of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and made the first call. I decided to call my mother first. Ellen had always prided herself on being a nurturing parent, frequently reminding us how she had sacrificed her own dreams to raise her children. If anyone would help, I thought it would be her. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Hi, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice sound strained. "Megan, is everything okay? You sound upset." I launched into my prepared story, telling her about the company suddenly closing, the lost wages, and my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, growing more concerned with each detail. "Oh, honey, that's terrible," she said when I finished. "Have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment would take weeks to process and that my emergency fund had been depleted by recent car repairs. "I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $4,000 to cover rent and bills until I can find something new. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, Megan, Richard and I just put a down payment on the lake house renovation. We're pretty cash poor right now." Her voice took on a slightly defensive tone. "Have you asked your father? Or Rachel? Eric makes good money at the hospital." I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I said truthfully. "And Rachel has the kids and their private school tuition." "Well, let me talk to Richard and see what we can do," she said finally. "But I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to, well, you know." I did know. Richard had never considered me his responsibility, making it clear from the beginning that his money was for my mother and any children they might have had together. They never did. "Sure, Mom. Just let me know as soon as you can. The rent is due next week." "I will, honey, and I'm so sorry about your job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign you should look at changing careers to something more stable." After hanging up, I noted her response in a journal I had started for this purpose. She had expressed concern, but immediately looked for ways to pass the responsibility to someone else. She had not outright refused, but I suspected her conversation with Richard would conveniently result in them being unable to help. The next day, I met my father Thomas for coffee. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively in such a setting. "You look tired," was his greeting as I sat down across from him. I gave him a weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at certain details. When I finished by asking for help with the $4,000, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Megan, I've always taught you about financial responsibility," he began, slipping into his lecturer voice. "This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved at all times. What happened to that plan?" "Life happened, Dad," I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money." He sighed heavily. "And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your cable subscription and those streaming services?" For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once did he offer any actual help. "I'd love to help you, Megan, but Linda and I are focusing on our retirement right now. We can't afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible." He patted my hand patronizingly. "This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. Even expecting this response, it hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My sister Rachel was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. Her husband Eric was golfing, giving us privacy to talk. "Megan, what a surprise!" she exclaimed when she opened the door. "The kids are at their swimming lessons. Come in." Her house was immaculate, with expensive furniture and framed professional family photos on every wall. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen, sipping lattes from her commercial-grade espresso machine, I told her about my situation. "Oh my God, that's awful," she gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. "I can't believe they would just close like that. Poor you." Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hopeful. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $4,000. "Oh," she said, her expression shifting slightly. "Well, this is actually not a great time. We just paid the kids, private school tuition, and we're redoing the master bathroom." She glanced around nervously. Eric handles most of our finances, and he's really strict about our budget. I understand, I said quietly. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. I know, she said quickly. Let me talk to Eric and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount? Or maybe you can move in with us temporarily? The guest room is being used for storage right now, but we could clear it out. I thanked her for the offer but explained that moving would be difficult with my job search centered in the city. She promised to call me after speaking with Eric, but the way she avoided eye contact told me all I needed to know. My brother David was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief message. That sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. We'll call you later. He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered. And when I tried calling him directly, the calls went straight to voicemail. This from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with tearful promises of repayment that never materialized. My stepmother Linda was blunt when I called her, not bothering with even a pretense of sympathy. Megan, I'm sure this is difficult, but Thomas and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered downsizing your apartment or getting a roommate? When I pointed out that I had helped them with repairs to their vacation cabin last year, she bristled. That was different. That was a family property that you also enjoy using. The fact that I had only been invited to the cabin once in 5 years apparently didn't matter. My stepfather Richard was even worse. You're not my daughter, he said plainly when I called. I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path. My cousin Tyler initially seemed sympathetic, promising to, quote, definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. But when the day came, he texted an hour before saying something had come up and he would reschedule. He never did, and eventually stopped responding to my messages altogether. Aunt Patricia's response was perhaps the least surprising but still painful. Well, Megan, I always said that company of yours seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that job at the bank after college, but no one listens to me. She then proceeded to tell me about all the financial troubles other family members had experienced and how they had overcome them without begging for handouts. By that evening, I had heard from Rachel that Aunt Patricia was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. After a week of rejections, half-promises, and outright silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my family. But the reality was still painful to accept. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years couldn't or wouldn't return the favor when I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Carol. Megan, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay? Her voice was warm with genuine concern. I had not actually reached out to Carol yet, planning to call her the next day. The fact that she had called me first after hearing about my situation secondhand spoke volumes. I'm hanging in there, I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small diner near her apartment. Carol looked exactly as she always did, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you anyway. As we ate, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to reach out to some former colleagues who had connections in the business world. Then, after our plates had been cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I want you to take this, she said, sliding it across the table. It's $2. $500. I know it's not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent at least. I stared at the envelope in shock. Carol, I can't take this. This is too much. Nonsense. Family helps family. And I want you to know something else. She reached across the table and took my hand. If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need to. Tears filled my eyes, and this time they were completely genuine. Thank you, I whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. Now, don't you worry about paying this back right away, she continued. Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you. As we left the diner, Carol hugged me again. You're gonna be okay, Megan. You're smart and capable. This is just a bump in the road. Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $2,500, more money than I knew Carol could comfortably spare. The contrast between her response and the rest of my family's could not have been more stark. The only person who had offered genuine help was the one with the least to give. After meeting with Carol, I did some research that left me stunned. $2,500 represented nearly all of her savings, and I discovered that she had been quietly dealing with arthritis that made her job shelving books increasingly painful. Her medication costs had recently increased, and she had been picking up extra tutoring work to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Carol, who had so little, had given me almost everything she had without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $12,000 on a bathroom renovation, couldn't spare $4,000 to help her daughter with rent and living expenses. The next day, I invited Carol to my apartment for dinner. As she settled onto my worn couch, I noticed for the first time how tired she looked, the fine lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. Carol, I need to tell you something, I began, setting a cup of tea in front of her. I haven't been completely honest with you. Her expression remained open, curious, rather than concerned. What is it, honey? I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I still have my position. The words tumbled out quickly. I made up the story to see who in the family would help me if I needed it. Carol was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I see. Are you angry with me? I asked suddenly, afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. No, not angry. Sad maybe. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way. She took a sip of her tea. But I understand why you did it. Our family hasn't always been kind to you. You were the only one who offered to help, I told her. Everyone else had excuses, or just ignored me entirely. Carol sighed. People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself. What do you mean? She set down her cup and folded her hands in her lap. My ex-husband, Keith. Did I ever tell you why we really divorced? I shook my head. The family story had always been vague, something about growing apart. I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died, about $30,000. Not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Keith immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's business ventures. She smiled ruefully. I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a small house eventually. We fought about it for months. What happened? One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year. She shook her head at the memory. When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I had no idea, I said, shocked. The family preferred the growing apart story. Less messy. She reached for my hand. The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person, and it's a painful lesson. I'm so sorry that happened to you, I said, squeezing her hand. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. She looked at me intently. Money doesn't just reveal who others truly are, Megan. It reveals who we are too, how we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror. Her words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. Carol, there's something else I need to tell you. Something big. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $34 million. Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I haven't told anyone else, not my parents, not Rachel or David, not even Emma. You're the first to know. Oh, Megan, she breathed. That's life-changing. I know, and that's why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money. Carol nodded slowly. I understand that. But what will you do now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money is secure, and I have good financial advisors, but I don't know how to handle the family. Carol considered this. You know, you don't owe anyone anything, Megan, not even me. But I want to help you, I insisted. Your arthritis, a better apartment, whatever you need. She smiled gently. I don't need anything from you, sweetheart. I'm happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it's full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my books, and now this wonderful secret with my favorite niece. She patted my hand. Just knowing you are secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when she knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Carol and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the family about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Heard you asked Rachel for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you're playing us against each other. Another came from my father. Stephanie tells me you've been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws rather than an opportunity to show compassion. In doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Carol, I met with Andrew to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Carol, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She's very proud. Andrew nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She wouldn't have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house, near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my marketing job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at supporting literacy programs in underserved communities, inspired by Carol's passion for books and education. What about the rest of your family? Andrew asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head. Not right now, maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Emma and finally told her the whole truth about the lottery win and the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I'm not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something, to do good, starting with Carol. She deserves it. Emma agreed. And what about everyone else, the ones who failed your test? I'm still figuring that out. I've called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone show up at my apartment. My mother and Richard, my father and Linda, Rachel and Eric, even David, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Patricia arrived with a disapproving frown already in place. Carol came last, giving me a secret smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother shifted uncomfortably. David suddenly became very interested in his phone. Rachel and Eric exchanged glances. The truth is, I've been doing some soul-searching these past few weeks. I realized I've spent years being the person everyone calls when they need help, but when I reached out for support, very few of you were there for me. The room grew tense. My father cleared his throat. Now, Megan, I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I'm not here to shame anyone or to demand anything. I just want to be honest about where we stand. I looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. I've decided to make some changes in my life. I'm leaving my marketing job to start a nonprofit focused on literacy in underserved communities. A nonprofit? My mother exclaimed. But how will you support yourself? I've figured it out, I said simply. I don't need as much as I thought I did. This sounds financially irresponsible, my father said, frowning. You've just lost your job and now you're jumping into something unstable? I smiled. Actually, I didn't lose. Patricia spread gossip about my irresponsibility. The only person who offered genuine help without conditions was Carol. All eyes turned to Carol, who sat quietly in the corner, her hands folded in her lap. I don't need your money, I continued. I never did. My job. I made that up. The room fell silent as everyone stared at me in confusion. You? What? Rachel asked. I made it up. I wanted to see who would help me if I truly needed it. It was a test, and most of you failed. Protests erupted around the room. That's manipulative. How could you lie about something like that? I knew something didn't add up. I let them vent for a moment before continuing. Yes, it was manipulative. Yes, it was deceptive. And I'm not proud of feeling I needed to do it. But what does it say about our family that none of you questioned why I might resort to such a test? What does it say that almost none of you offered to help someone you claimed to love when they were in need? My mother's face had turned pale. I told you I would talk to Richard. And then you never got back to me. I finished for her. Dad lectured me about financial responsibility. Rachel made excuses about bathroom renovations. David completely ghosted me. Patricia spread gossip about my irresponsibility. The only person who offered genuine help without conditions was Carol. All eyes turned to Carol, who sat quietly in the corner, her hands folded in her lap. I don't need your money, I continued. I never did. What I needed was to know who sees me as a person and who sees me as a resource. Now I know. So this was all some kind of twisted game? Linda asked, her voice sharp. No, it was a revelation. And it's changed how I see all of you, but more importantly, how I see myself. I've spent years trying to earn your love and approval through sacrifice and generosity. I allowed myself to be used because I believed that's what family meant. Now I understand that real love doesn't keep a balance sheet. My brother finally spoke up. So what now? You're cutting us all off because we didn't give you money you didn't even need? I shook my head. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm establishing boundaries. I'm no longer going to drop everything when you call with a crisis. I'm no longer going to empty my savings for people who wouldn't do the same for me. I'm going to invest my time and energy in relationships that are reciprocal and genuine. I walked to the door and opened it. I think we're done here. I've said what I needed to say. One by one, they filed out, some angry, some defensive, some silent. Carol was the last to leave, giving my hand a squeeze as she passed. I'm proud of you, she whispered. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, feeling lighter than I had in years. I had expected to feel guilty or anxious after the confrontation, but instead, I felt free. The truth had been painful for everyone involved, but it had also been necessary. For too long, I had allowed others to define my worth by what I could give them. Now I was reclaiming my power. The following week was transformative. I gave notice at my marketing firm, surprising my boss Vanessa, who suddenly became very interested in keeping me once she realized I was serious about leaving. I declined her counteroffer with newfound confidence. I met with Andrew to finalize the details of Carol's trust. We structured it in a way that would provide her with a comfortable monthly income while covering her medical expenses and allowing her to retire early if she chose to. I also put a down payment on a charming cottage just a few minutes from the house I was planning to buy for myself. Emma helped me search for office space for my new nonprofit, which I decided to call Page Turner. Our mission would be to establish literacy programs, mini libraries, and reading corners in communities with limited access to books. Carol would serve as our educational advisor, drawing on her decades of experience as a librarian to help shape our programs. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, I handed Carol the keys to her new home. We stood on the front porch, looking out at the small but beautiful garden filled with late-blooming flowers. "I can't believe this is mine," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "You deserve this and so much more," I told her. "You've shown me what true family means." "Have you told any of them yet?" she asked. "About the lottery?" I shook my head. "No, and I don't think I will. Not anytime soon, anyway. They need to see me differently before I can trust them with that information." The family dynamics had shifted considerably since our confrontation. My mother called more frequently, making awkward attempts to rebuild our relationship. My father sent occasional texts checking in, though they still often contained unsolicited advice. Rachel invited me to Sunday dinners, which I sometimes accepted. David remained distant, perhaps the most wounded by my rejection of his habitual financial requests. I had established clear boundaries with all of them. I would be part of their lives, but on my terms. I would offer emotional support, but financial assistance would come only in true emergencies, and with clear expectations. Some adjusted better than others to this new reality, but all of them had to acknowledge that our relationship had fundamentally changed. As for the lottery money, I kept my promise to myself to use it wisely. In addition to securing Carol's future and funding my nonprofit, I established a scholarship program for first-generation college students, made anonymous donations to causes I believed in, and set aside funds for future needs. I did buy myself a new car, nothing flashy, just reliable, and moved into a comfortable home with a garden and a library. I traveled when I wanted to, often taking Carol along on adventures she had dreamed of, but never thought possible. I went back to school part-time for a master's degree in nonprofit management, fulfilling my long-held educational aspirations. The greatest gift of the lottery wasn't the money itself, but the clarity it brought to my life. It had shown me who my true family was. Not necessarily those connected by blood, but those connected by genuine care and respect. It had freed me from the cycle of trying to earn love through sacrifice, and allowed me to build a life aligned with my values rather than my insecurities. 1 year after winning the lottery, I sat in the newly opened community center that housed Page Turner's main operations. Children filled the reading room, lost in books that transported them to different worlds. Volunteers, including Emma and some of the scholarship recipients, moved among the tables, offering guidance and encouragement. Carol sat in a comfortable chair in the corner, reading aloud to a group of captivated preschoolers. Her face was animated, her voice changing for each character, her eyes bright with joy. The arthritis that had once threatened her career was now well managed, thanks to proper medical care, and she had found a new purpose in retirement, sharing her love of reading with a new generation. Watching her, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what winning had really meant, not the material possessions or financial security, though those were significant, but the ability to create meaningful change in the lives of people I cared about. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Dinner at our house this Sunday?" "Richard is grilling." I smiled slightly. Our relationship was still a work in progress, but it was changing, slowly becoming more balanced. They still didn't know about my lottery win, and perhaps never would. What mattered was that they were learning to value me for who I was, not what I could give them. I texted back, "I'll bring dessert." That evening, Carol and I sat on her porch, watching the sunset with cups of tea in hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. Not telling them about the money? I considered the question. No, the money didn't change who I am, but it showed me who everyone else is, including myself. I smiled at her. And it led me here, to this work, to helping others find their voice through literacy. How could I regret that? Carol nodded. You know, when I was young, my grandmother used to say that true wealth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give. Not just money, but time, attention, respect. She patted my hand. By that measure, you were wealthy long before you won the lottery. Her words touched something deep within me. I had spent so many years feeling inadequate, always striving to prove my worth through what I could provide for others. Now I understood that my value had never been determined by my bank account or what I could do for my family. It had always been inherent in who I was, my compassion, my integrity, my capacity for love. The lottery hadn't given me worth. It had simply given me the freedom to recognize the worth I'd always had. As darkness fell and stars appeared in the sky, I felt profound gratitude, not for the millions in my account, but for the priceless gift of self-knowledge and the chance to build a life of purpose. I had won more than money. I had won the opportunity to discover what truly mattered. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with the millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. And that, in the end, is worth more than any lottery jackpot. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.